By the time drivers realize they've lost visibility,
Imagine you're driving down Interstate 81. It's just a regular Tuesday. You've got the cruise control on, the music playing, and the road ahead looks perfectly clear. There are no sirens, no emergency broadcasts interrupting the radio, no warning at all. Then, in the blink of an eye, the world just deletes itself. 1 second, you're looking at the horizon. The next, you're staring into a wall of pure white. The road markings, gone. The brake lights of the car in front of you, vanished. It's like someone reached over and pulled the plug on reality. In less than 10 seconds, you go from 65 miles an hour to driving blind. And that's when physics takes the wheel. Your tires lose their grip. Steering becomes nothing more than a guess. And then the sounds start. First, a crunch, then another. One crash turns into 10. 10 turns into 40. It's the sound of metal folding on metal, echoing through a silence that's otherwise buried by the wind. But here's the thing we need to understand. This wasn't about bad drivers. These were just everyday people doing everyday things until the weather stripped away the one thing we all rely on to survive, our ability to see. When a massive winter system slams into Arctic air, it does more than just dump snow. It attacks our infrastructure. It slows our reaction times and exposes just how fragile our modern world really is when the temperature plummets. Suddenly, highways designed for high-speed travel become ice traps. Power grids that were built decades ago start to groan under the weight of ice and demand they were never meant to handle. Even the best emergency plans fall apart when they collide with the brutal reality of distance and ice. And the danger isn't just out there on the highway, it follows you home. In the towns nearby, roofs are groaning under the weight of heavy snow. Power lines are snapping like twigs. Fires are actually breaking out in neighborhoods that are buried in snowdrifts, and families are left scrambling to stay warm, sometimes making desperate choices that put them in even more danger. In those freezing temperatures, help doesn't always come right away. It's not because the first responders aren't ready, it's because they physically can't get to you. So this isn't really a story about a snowstorm. It's a story about what happens when winter pushes every single system we have, transportation, energy, emergency response, and human judgment, past the breaking point all at the exact same time. A whiteout isn't just heavy snow. It's what happens when the systems we trust simply stop working. It's what experts call the complete collapse of visual reference. It's that terrifying moment when the sky, the ground, and the distance ahead all melt into a single blank sheet of white. When conditions get this bad, the human brain actually loses the tools it needs to keep you alive, specifically depth perception and motion awareness. This creates a really dangerous disconnect. Drivers often swear they are slowing down when in reality they are still tearing down the highway at full speed. On open stretches like Interstate 81, the danger multiplies. Out there, you don't have buildings, trees, or signs to help ground your vision. You are relying entirely on lane markings and the faint red glow of taillights ahead of you. But when you have snow falling sideways at 2 inches an hour, mixed with 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts, those cues don't just fade away gradually, they are erased instantly. This creates a deadly illusion. Your vehicle feels stable, the tires are still humming on the pavement, your sense of motion feels completely normal. But here's the scary reality. By the time a driver realizes they can't see, they've usually traveled the length of a football field or more without any meaningful control over the car. And now you're in a trap. If you brake too hard, you trigger a skid. If you brake too late, impact is guaranteed. Then you have to factor in the truck traffic. A fully loaded tractor-trailer can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. On ice-glazed pavement, the distance they need to stop stretches far beyond what anyone expects. A jackknifed trailer doesn't just block a lane, it becomes a literal wall that is invisible until it's too late to miss. A whiteout doesn't just blind your eyes, it essentially disables your decision-making. When your vision fails, your brain struggles to calculate speed, distance, or direction. You hesitate between braking and steering, losing seconds you simply don't have. And often, it's that hesitation, not just the speed, that turns a scary situation into a fatal one. In storms like this, the real threat isn't panic, it's confidence. It's the belief that experience, all-wheel drive or a steady hand can somehow overcome physics. America is built for movement. Our interstates are designed for efficiency and speed, operating on the assumption that we keep moving until something visibly forces us to stop. But that expectation becomes dangerous in winter, because the road can look perfectly passable right up until the exact moment it isn't.
On major highways like I-81, we are all conditioned to maintain our momentum. There is a psychological pressure at play here. Slowing down too much feels unsafe, like you're becoming an obstacle. Pulling over to the shoulder feels even riskier. Between the delivery trucks, the commuters, and the flow of traffic, there is a subtle, unspoken demand to just keep up the pace. Even as the weather gets worse, many of us fall back on our equipment for reassurance. We trust our winter tires, our all-wheel drive, or our years of experience behind the wheel. We tell ourselves we can handle it, but often that confidence is misplaced. Let's look at the numbers. At 65 miles per hour, your vehicle travels nearly 95 feet every single second. In whiteout conditions, that means you can travel the entire length of a semi-truck trailer in half a second without ever actually seeing it. By the time your brain processes what is happening, reaction time has already eaten up the distance you needed to stop. Physics takes over long before your judgment ever gets a chance to intervene. Commercial trucks amplify this risk significantly. An 80,000-pound tractor-trailer cannot stop like a sedan, especially when the pavement is polished into a sheet of ice. When just one of those trucks loses traction, it becomes both a roadblock and a trigger. Drivers coming up from behind fall victim to a terrifying optical trick. They assume the vehicle ahead is still moving, right up until the moment it fills their windshield. We need to realize that winter disasters on the highway are rarely caused by reckless behavior. They are caused by normal behavior trying to operate in abnormal conditions. Drivers trust the road design. They trust their routine. They trust that if something was wrong, they would see it in time. But a whiteout removes that warning phase entirely. By the time brake lights appear, you may only have a fraction of a second left. No amount of experience can compensate for missing information. And when dozens of vehicles are sharing those same assumptions at highway speeds, a single failure starts a chain reaction that no individual driver can stop. Now, when most people imagine winter danger, they picture freezing darkness, not fire. But during extreme snow events, fire becomes one of the most lethal secondary threats. In communities buried under the storm, the cold and the flames often arrive together. Take places like Erie County, for example. The snow that fell there wasn't the light, powdery stuff. It was dense, wet, and heavy, exactly the kind of snow that crushes infrastructure. As the accumulation piled up past 2 feet, power lines began to sag and snap. Transformers started failing. Entire neighborhoods lost electricity in a matter of minutes. And the moment the power cuts out, the heating systems shut down, leaving families in the dark and the cold. Suddenly, the furnaces go silent. Houses that were warm, safe sanctuaries just hours before begin to bleed heat rapidly. As the temperature inside the home drops well below freezing, the fear of hypothermia sets in, and families are forced to turn to whatever source of warmth they can find. Portable generators get dragged into garages. Heaters are plugged into circuits that are already overloaded. Some people even bring charcoal grills indoors in a desperate attempt to stay warm. But in doing so, they invite a silent killer. Snowdrifts can block exterior exhaust vents, trapping carbon monoxide inside the home. It is invisible, it is odorless, and often it is deadly. At the same time, the failing power grid creates a spark. When high voltage lines snap and fall onto rooftops or trees, they create electrical arcs. These ignite fires that can spread beneath layers of snow. And with the wind howling, those flames are fanned through structures that are already weakened by the heavy snow load. Firefighters arrive at scenes that defy all instinct, houses engulfed in flames while surrounded by deep ice and drifts. The challenges they face are extreme. Hydrants are buried under 3 or 4 feet of snow, requiring crews to waste precious minutes digging them out by hand before water can even flow. Hose lines freeze solid, valves seize. Even the roads, narrowed to single lanes by the plows, make the response slow and dangerous. You see, winter storms don't eliminate the risk of fire, they magnify it. When the power fails and the mercury plunges, the line between staying warm and staying alive becomes dangerously thin. The cold doesn't just threaten us from the outside, it forces us to make decisions inside our homes that can turn survival into tragedy. As conditions worsened, the storm exposed a harsh truth about emergency response. Even the best trained teams on Earth can be brought to a crawl when the environment itself becomes the obstacle. Police, firefighters, and paramedics were ready to respond, but getting to the scene was another matter entirely. Snow narrowed the roads down to single lanes. Drifts swallowed the shoulders and hid the guardrails. Plows were running non-stop, yet the wind refilled the cleared paths just minutes after they passed. In rural areas, response times stretched from minutes to hours. In some locations, crews simply couldn't reach the people who needed them at all. They were forced to wait for the weather to break or for heavy equipment to arrive, while the cold added yet another layer of danger. With wind chills plunging to 10 degrees below zero, the cold became an active enemy. Responders faced the risk of rapid frostbite just by being outside. The equipment started fighting them too. Hydraulic rescue tools stiffened up in the freeze. Battery-powered gear drained way faster than the specs said it would. Even the most basic tasks, cutting through metal, stabilizing a wrecked car, or trying to start an IV line, became incredibly difficult as fingers went numb and visibility dropped to near zero. Inside the hospitals, the strain was breaking limits. Emergency departments were suddenly treating a chaotic mix of trauma: car crash victims, burn injuries from house fires, and severe cold exposure, all at the same time. To make matters worse, staff shortages hit hard. Nurses and technicians physically couldn't commute through the snow-choked streets. Some hospitals had to lock down, triggering emergency protocols that kept staff on site overnight because sending them home was simply too dangerous. But the damage wasn't just physical. The psychological impact started surfacing almost immediately. Survivors spoke about panic attacks triggered by something as simple as falling snow or flashing lights in the distance. First responders quietly carried the weight of scenes they wouldn't be able to forget: vehicles crushed beyond recognition and homes burning behind walls of snow. They carried the burden of families waiting for answers that took hours to arrive. Crisis hotlines had to expand rapidly, recognizing that the trauma doesn't just vanish when the roads reopen. For a lot of people, this storm shattered the assumption that we are always safe and in control. It revealed how quickly isolation sets in when help is delayed, not because of a lack of will, but because of the physical limits imposed by winter itself. It wasn't just testing our infrastructure, it was testing our endurance, our patience, and that thin line between being prepared and being overwhelmed. When the snow finally stopped and the wind began to ease, the storm didn't actually end, it just changed its form. What was left was a landscape defined by exhaustion and hidden danger. Roads were reopened cautiously, only to be closed again as flash freezing turned meltwater into invisible sheets of black ice. Accidents kept happening days after the last snowflake fell, catching drivers off guard who assumed the worst was over. Utility crews worked around the clock, but the recovery was uneven. Some neighborhoods got their power back in hours, others waited days, watching their breath fog in the cold while damaged lines lay buried beneath snowbanks and fallen trees. In those sub-freezing temperatures, every single hour without electricity carried a heavy cost. Pipes froze and burst, food spoiled. Homes that were once sanctuaries turned into unlivable iceboxes. Temporary shelters started filling up, not just with people hiding from the storm, but with families who had survived the blizzard only to be defeated by its consequences. Almost immediately, the investigations began.
everyone was looking for the failure points. Transportation officials had to face the hard question: should the highways have been closed sooner? Engineers analyzed a power grid that had been pushed far beyond its design limits by the extreme cold and wet snow. Emergency managers had to reconcile the fact that having a plan doesn't mean much if you physically cannot access the people who need help. Meanwhile, the economic impact mounted quietly. Small businesses lost critical weekend revenue. Deliveries stalled completely. Repair costs skyrocketed as contractors faced shortages of both labor and materials. Insurance claims surged, creating a backlog that delayed recovery for homeowners who were already under immense stress. In some neighborhoods, rebuilding had to start while the ground was still covered in snow, an expensive and imperfect process. But perhaps the most lasting effect was psychological. Survivors spoke of a lingering anxiety that returned during even minor snowfalls. First responders went back to their routine calls, but they carried with them the heavy memories of scenes shaped by ice and fire. The storm became a reference point for everyone who lived through it. It was a stark reminder of how fast normal life can fracture. History won't remember this simply as a blizzard. It will be remembered as a system stress test. It revealed just how interconnected our modern lives have become and how terrifyingly fast those connections fail when winter pushes every limit at once. When the snow finally melts and traffic begins to move again, it is easy to believe the danger has passed. But storms like this leave behind more than just cleared roads and repaired power lines. They leave a warning about the fragility of the world we've built. They leave us asking tough questions about our readiness, about the risks we accept, and about just how razor-thin our margin for error really is. You can't define this storm just by inch counts or wind speeds. Its real legacy is defined by exactly what broke under the pressure. Highways engineered for speed turned into blind traps. Power grids built for a different era crumbled under a weight they were never designed to hold. And our emergency responders were pushed past their limits, slowed down not because they hesitated, but because physics simply wouldn't let them move. But in the middle of that collapse, we saw resilience. Neighbors were out checking on neighbors. First responders kept pushing through the exhaustion and the freeze. Communities opened their doors, shared what they had, and refused to let the isolation win. Those moments mattered, but the cost was high. We can't treat extreme winter weather as a rare anomaly anymore. As temperature swings get sharper and storms intensify faster, events like this are becoming the ultimate stress test for our modern way of life. Every storm exposes weaknesses that we can't just ignore once the plows come through. The real danger isn't the storm you see on the radar, it's the one that steals your time, your visibility, and your options all in a single heartbeat. It forces you to make life or death decisions before your brain can even process what's happening. It's a brutal reminder of how fast a routine day can turn into a crisis. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on winter storms, please hit that like button. And more importantly, share this video with someone who drives long distances, lives in a cold region, or works in emergency response. These are the stories we need to hear before the next alert goes out. I'll leave you with one final question to think about. When the next major storm hits, will our systems just bend, or will they break all over again?